everyone, I'm Stephanie Panay, and today I'll be talking about mentorship, but in a roundabout way. I'll be focusing my discussion on something called transitional objects. These are things first posited by a psychologist and paediatrician called Donald Winnicott in the 1950s. And I'll be basing this podcast on a reading of Play School, The World as Transitional Object, which is an essay from my book, Alchemists of Suburbia, A Course in Miracles, Psychology and the Art of Integration. Let's begin with a reading now of Play School, The World as Transitional Object. I can't imagine Charlie Brown's friend Linus without his blanket. The two are inextricably entwined. Linus is often pictured lovingly hugging his blanket close or holding it while sucking his thumb. Likewise, many children develop strong attachments to a soft toy, a book, or just about any object. They take them everywhere, especially if they leave the house or experience unfamiliar circumstances or environments. These objects of comfort and security are what the British psychoanalyst and paediatrician Donald Winnicott called transitional objects, and they have an important function in the meeting of our internal and external worlds. Subtitled Transitional Objects. According to Winnicott, the transitional object is symbolic of a child's internal unity with a giving, accepting, nurturing parent. We first develop attachments to such objects between the ages of 4 and 12 months, as we begin to realise that we are separate from our mother or primary carer. In fact, because the child is trying to find a solution to the reality of their parent's separateness, they can sometimes feel a greater need for the transitional object than the actual parent. They have some control over blanket, teddy, or Buzz Lightyear, but mum and dad come and go. And in less than ideal home environments, children can also begin to exercise an inner voice themselves that is wise, understanding, and supportive, with the help of a stuffed animal or other transitional object. "No one understands me like Rabbit can," said a boy in one of Winnicott's studies. As a child becomes accustomed to the reality of both their connectedness to others and their separateness, they gradually let go of their attachment to the transitional object. It's simply laid aside without fuss or the need for external encouragement. As adults, we retain the habit of establishing special objects, such as a favourite mug, chair, or book, as symbols of the fusion we originally felt. Transitional objects are also replaced by transitional phenomena in the wider culture, such as music and works of art. A clear and literal example of art as transitional phenomena can be found in one of the world's largest sculptures. It's called Mammon by Louise Bourgeois. Mammon is a steel sculpture of a spider-like creature measuring 30 feet high and 33 feet wide. It's an incredible work I find disconcerting and uncanny. But for Louise, Mammon evokes something entirely different, as expressed in her poem, Ode to My Mother. And this is the poem. The friend, the spider, why the spider? Because my best friend was my mother, and she was deliberate, clever, patient, soothing, reasonable, dainty, subtle, indispensable, neat, and useful as a spider. She could also defend herself and me by refusing to answer stupid, inquisitive, embarrassing personal questions. I shall never tire of representing her. Likewise, some religious icons and beliefs can be regarded as transitional phenomena. The concept of God or Christ as a loving presence and a source of security can travel with us via a necklace with a cross, or the promise of blessings from Ganesh can reach us through an image on the wall. Subtitle: Transitional Space. The transitional object of the child occupies the transitional space between themselves and their parent. It is also the intermediate space between inner and outer worlds, between what is us and what is not us. Winnicott saw the transitional object, the cherished teddy bear, blanket, or storybook, for example, as something that a child sees as both not me, but also not me. What he meant was that while the object is something separate from the child, it is still within the child's control, and that makes all the difference. It can respond to what they need from it, when they need it. They can pick it up when they choose to, and they can take it with them. In this sense, it is not me. As adults, we can become particularly attached to objects that symbolise this meeting place between inner and outer worlds. Any creative pursuit, for example, involves a tangible meeting of inner and outer worlds. Just as I can't imagine Linus without his blanket, I always think of Charlie Brown's other friend, Schroeder, playing his piano. And then there's Peppermint Patty and her love of baseball, the sporting arena in which a significant aspect of her inner world is expressed. Chances are Peppermint Patty had a significant attachment to her baseball mitt, and Schroeder to his piano. And then we have our heroes associated with our chosen field of endeavour. These heroes act as a kind of parent. Their strength is ours, their success our hope and inspiration, and their shared appreciation for our field makes them a source of understanding and care. They're our guides, our support, our comfort. Whenever we come to a major threshold in life, a time of significant change, perhaps even turmoil, we can find ourselves unconsciously gravitating towards a hero and a transitional object which we both associate with them and with something essential to our own being. This was the case for Sophie Oliver, a university lecturer in English whose experience of pregnancy and motherhood was full of ambivalence. Oliver detailed her experience in an essay called Jean Reese's Dress. In it, she describes how she felt ill-equipped to mother a child. The whole pregnancy-motherhood scenario was totally different to anything she had ever known before, and she prized her independence. Not knowing who she was or what she was doing, she was drawn to a dress that was given to her by a friend, and that had belonged to the author Jean Rees, who was famous for her novel Wide Sargasso Sea. Rees had also struggled with motherhood, and in later life rekindled a connection with her daughter through a mutual appreciation for clothing. Oliver steeped herself in the world of Rees, her novels and her personal life, and experienced a felt connection through Rees's dress. The dress became Oliver's self-described transitional object, helping her to connect with the world of literature, which she loved, and with a person, a hero, who had walked the path of motherhood before her and had managed. Just as the infant struggles with the dawning awareness of separation, mothers, and carers in general, can experience a loss of self in the all-consuming demands of their caretaker world. Rees's dress was a tangible connection to the imagined mentorship of Rees and to the world of literature, which was an integral part of Oliver's sense of self. In the transitional space, Oliver was able to retain a connection to what Winnicott calls the personal impulse, which helped her move more toward connection with her child. This might seem paradoxical. However, Winnicott points out that we need to have a sense of our true self so that joining with another doesn't feel like a dangerous prospect, a potential loss of self. If we're caught up in finding and reacting to all sorts of impingements, then we have lost contact with our true self and personal impulse. The kind of preoccupation that gets us frazzled, I have to do this, I have to do that, what should I do, also has us feeling fragmented, without any sense of wholeness, confidence, or stability. This is the stuff of a false self. In contrast, our true self is a spontaneous expression of being. According to Winnicott, the ideal is that we can be alone in the presence of others, that's his phrase, that we are able to have a connection with the expansiveness and personal impulse of our true self whilst in company. In this way, we can interact without being reactive and defensive. We can be calm. Winnicott linked this to being able to tolerate the kind of mental expansiveness that is experienced through some meditative practices. We can let go of I, me, and mine if we feel connected to our true self. So, What he's saying is that if we feel connected to our true self, we no longer have a concern about our needs being filled because we're already connected to a sense of our true self. So in the situation with Sophie Oliver and her becoming a mother and feeling herself lost in caring for her new child, tapping into that mentorship, that transitional object of Jean Reese's dress, helped her get a sense of having a mentor for motherhood, but also because of that literary connection with Jean Reese, she could have a connection with the sense of being a writer herself. And so she didn't lose herself in her new occupation of looking after her child. She could have both. She could bring that sense of her writing identity to motherhood and not feel it was lost, thereby not be anxious about her time being impinged upon, because that self was still acknowledged within her, still alive within her. And I think about Patti Smith, the singer, songwriter and poet. And when she had her first baby, she did let go of creating music for a while, but she did still do her poetry, and her poetry often lends itself to songwriting as well, in the hours when she could. And she still always had a connection with that creative spirit, also through her reading and her broader interests. Perhaps you could say that she still approached the world with a creative person's eye. Back to the essay. If, as Jung says, the meaning of life is to embody the wholeness of our personality, then this process of meeting a threshold and discovering a transitional object might be central to growth. It's through a dialogue between our inner and outer worlds that we understand more about ourselves and how we coexist with the rest of society. When we cross a threshold, we move from one classroom into another and begin a new series of lessons, all designed to help us answer the question, what am I? To ask this question means being willing to recognise our defensiveness and our reactivity, our needs to please, appease, and control. What does our personal impulse say? Subtitle: Play School. To Winnicott, being our true self means engaging with others in a spirit of reciprocity. In any relationship, reciprocity exists if we're not trying to impose something on someone, for example, being aggressive, or submissively acquiescing in a spirit of defeat. Reciprocity implies an exchange in which all parties give and receive. There is a mutuality about it instead of a sense of one-sidedness. This, according to Winnicott, naturally occurs when we are coming from our true self, as does an ability to be spontaneous, creative, and playful. This is how our inner and outer worlds meet in a friendly manner. I think this is an important point that Winnicott is making, especially in relation to a lot of the debates that are going on currently. You see them all over social media, on the news, between parties of differing opinions. It really is about having power over the other side. And in Winnicott's terminology, it's not creative. And there's certainly no play, which is quite obvious. There is a need to try and dominate the other side. And therefore, if the dialogue isn't truly creative, we're never going to hear anything new, and we're never going to actually hear anything helpful. We're just going to have a battle in front of us. But I think that's quite a pertinent point for the current moment in society. Carrying on. Creativity is the opposite of reactivity. The word creative relates to something new, something beyond habit, beyond imitation, a surprise. There's no motive to impose, to comply, to achieve, just a simple personal impulse to do whatever it is we do. Creativity begins when we trust ourselves enough to stop emulating our heroes, as supportive as they are, and start letting inspiration come through us. We emulate to learn, but then we must be prepared to put the books written by our heroes aside and extend out our own antenna. There is no great sense of I in the truly creative space, no sense of competition, no battle to fight. These things place a limitation on the mind and obscure insight and spontaneity. Spontaneity isn't the same as compulsiveness or impulsiveness. There isn't a sense of being driven or out of control. Spontaneity is, paradoxically, aliveness and relaxation at the same time. It is light and playful and seeks nothing. If play becomes a competition or requires meeting other people's expectations, it isn't play anymore. It isn't fun or inherently rewarding. The enjoyment of being engaged in play or creativity also means that life seems tedious when spontaneity ceases and we get back to the real world. People who do what we generally regard as creative work, drawing, inventing, composing, often become depressed when they don't have a project to work on. If they're not engaged with their transitional object, for example, the paintbrush, the piano, the typewriter, and bringing a creative impulse into fruition, life feels a lot heavier, duller. The thing about inspiration is that it can't be forced. Your antenna might be up, but nothing's coming through, at least not in a form that moves you to produce anything. You simply have to wait and keep that antenna up. However, depression and despondency dampen the connection. Not only do you feel down about not having a project to engage with, but your mood can lead to thoughts and ruminations that dull the antenna's receptivity. We might long for creativeness, but our very longing itself becomes an impediment, a perpetual source of disquiet. This is where it can be helpful, whether you identify yourself as an artist or not, to regard the whole world as a transitional object. Subtitle: The World as Transitional Object. Workbook Lesson 29 in A Course in Miracles states, God is in everything I see. This doesn't mean that God is literally in everything, but that his purpose is. Here's a quote from that lesson. Certainly God is not in a table, for example, as you see it, yet we emphasised yesterday that a table shares the purpose of the universe. That's the end of the quote. According to the Course's metaphysics, God didn't create the world. However, he did place a memory of his oneness within our minds, which the Course refers to as the Holy Spirit. God's purpose is forgiveness, our pathway to remembering the innocence and wholeness of our spiritual self. Seeing God's purpose in everything we see means giving it the purpose of remembering ourselves, instead of reinforcing guilt and shame and a host of grievances. A particular chair, for example, might remind us of who sat in it regularly, and this might bring up a load of unhappy memories. Or perhaps you see a chair in a shop that you'd love to buy but can't afford, and this leads to a spiral of resentments based on feelings of not enough money, not enough power, not enough love when you were younger, not enough attention, not enough. When we see through the lens of the past and the ego, we don't see anything as it is now. We don't see it with vision. The whole world can become our transitional object if we choose to see God's purpose within it. Quote from the Course. Try then, today, to begin to learn how to look on all things with love, appreciation, and open-mindedness. You do not see them now. Would you know what is in them? Nothing is as it appears to you. Its holy purpose stands beyond your little range. When vision has shown you the holiness that lights up the world, you will understand today's idea perfectly. End of quote. A transitional object is something that reminds us of an inner source of security and comfort, and at the same time helps our personal impulse emerge within our relationships. What I mean by personal impulse is the creative impulse that isn't based on preconceived ideas about ourselves and others. It doesn't come from defensiveness, and it doesn't have a "here we go again" moan attached to it. When we're identified with our ego, our reactive impulse is given free rein. We translate everything in terms of our accumulated experience, our prejudices, and our expectations. Whatever we do from this place will be old, If we're coming from a need to gain or to avoid loss, then we're in this mindset, and nothing we do can truly be regarded as creative. To live a creative life really means to see creative opportunities all around us, all of the time. Life itself becomes playful as we meet each circumstance with the desire to extend our antenna and be receptive to having a new response, where previously we could only ever imagine the same dull, tiresome reaction: a sigh, a cry, a compulsive need to fix something. This is the time to see our inner teacher's purpose in the world, to call on them for help, and to extend our antenna. Our judgments will fade as we observe them, and from this place of observation, that is without I, me, or mine, there can be perpetual renewal. This is true creativity. And that is the end of the essay. So basically what I'm saying at the end of the essay here is that if we use the course's practice of forgiveness in our daily lives, that practice itself is like having a transitional object. Whatever upsets us during the day, if we use forgiveness, the course's process of forgiveness, we get in touch with that internal teacher, so the mentor, that inner mentor. We also, through the process of forgiveness, help to let go of the shame and guilt that obscure our true self in terms of our personality and what is true to us, the whole idea of authenticity in that respect. But we also, in letting go of the shame and guilt, are getting more in touch with that sense of wholeness associated with our spiritual self. So the practice of forgiveness is like carrying around with us a transitional object, a blanket like Linus's blanket, or the piano for Schroeder, or Patty's baseball mitt. As adults, it's not uncommon. I myself find an object every now and then. It's this kind of a synchronicity around the way that I find a particular object. It finds me, really. And that object often will help me. It will have some meaning to me in relation to what I'm going through, particularly if it's a big threshold of change. And so, yeah, along with forgiveness, if we open our minds to help and guidance in whatever way we might receive it, synchronicity will often play its part, and we will come across an object that has specific symbolic meaning for us, and grab it, grab it, and let it be a reminder to you of the people who have gone before you, maybe in a similar capacity to what you're embarking on, and let it be a mentor to you and a reminder of what can be accomplished, what other people have accomplished. But carry the forgiveness with you every day as that transitional object as well. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has helped you, and tune in again. Thank you. Bye.